The Untold Story of Clint Eastwood's 8 Children. Clint Eastwood, the name alone paints a picture. The rugged cowboy squinting under a sun-bleached hat, the lawman who carried a .44 Magnum with quiet menace, the Oscar-winning director whose silence on set carried as much weight as a monologue. For over 6 decades, Eastwood has been one of Hollywood's most enduring icons. Yet behind the steely gaze and the unforgettable roles lies a story less known but equally cinematic. The story of 8 children, each growing up under the towering shadow of a man who became more myth than mortal. Clint was born in San Francisco in 1930, the son of working-class parents during the uncertainty of the Great Depression. His family moved constantly, chasing jobs across California, instilling in young Clint a sense of independence that would later define both his life and his roles. Tall, lanky, and soft-spoken, he worked odd jobs as a lifeguard, golf caddy, lumberjack, and even a piano player in local bars. His early life gave no hint that he would one day dominate Hollywood. After a stint in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, Clint drifted into Los Angeles with little more than ambition. Acting came almost by accident. Small, forgettable parts where he was criticized for his stiff delivery and towering frame. Some casting directors dismissed him outright, yet persistence was his greatest weapon. By 1959, he landed a role in the television Western Rawhide, which gave him a national platform. But it was a gamble overseas that changed everything. In the 1960s, Italian director Sergio Leone cast Clint as the man with no name in a trilogy of low-budget westerns. The films became global hits, and Eastwood's squint and silence transformed him into an international star. By the 1970s, he reinvented himself yet again with Dirty Harry, embodying a new kind of American anti-hero, raw, uncompromising, and unforgettable. But Eastwood was more than just an actor. In 1971, he stepped behind the camera with Play Misty, for Me, the beginning of a directing career that would span decades and redefine his legacy. Films like Unforgiven and Million Dollar Baby proved he wasn't just a star, he was a storyteller of the highest order. Yet for all the discipline and control he brought to his career, his personal life was anything but simple. Relationships overlapped, affairs sparked headlines, and children were born across different decades. Some grew up in the spotlight. Others were hidden secrets, revealed only years later. Together, they form a story as complex, dramatic, and human as any film Clint Eastwood ever made. And it all begins with the daughter he never knew existed, Laurie Murray. The story of Clint Eastwood's eldest child begins in secrecy, almost like a hidden reel of film lost in the archives. In 1954, before Clint had earned fame or fortune, he fathered a daughter during a youthful romance. That daughter, Laurie Murray, was placed for adoption. Clint himself reportedly had no knowledge of her existence at the time, and for decades, neither knew the other. Laurie was raised far from Hollywood's glitter and pressure. She built her own life, eventually marrying and raising children of her own in the Pacific Northwest. By all accounts, she led a stable, private existence, one that had nothing to do with the red carpets and Klieg lights that would come to define her biological father. It wasn't until the 1980s that Laurie uncovered the truth about her parentage. With courage, she reached out, and what might have been a painful or awkward revelation became an unexpected reconnection. Clint, now an established star and director, welcomed her into his life with warmth. Family insiders recall that he introduced Laurie to her half-siblings and made space for her in gatherings that had once seemed worlds away. For Laurie, it was a profound shift from an ordinary life into the orbit of one of the most famous men in the world. Yet she chose not to trade her privacy for notoriety. Unlike many celebrity children, she never sought a career in Hollywood, preferring to remain grounded in her own pursuits. Over time, she has become a familiar, if quiet, presence at Eastwood family events, often photographed beside her father and siblings. Laurie's journey is a reminder that even the most iconic lives hold hidden chapters. For Clint, acknowledging Laurie was not about scandal or headlines, but about connection, widening the circle of family even decades later. Her story set the stage for all that followed, the tale of a man whose personal legacy would stretch across generations in unexpected ways. Clint Eastwood. After Laurie's quiet arrival into Clint's life, his second daughter's story unfolded much closer to Hollywood. In 1964, Clint and dancer Roxanne Tunis welcomed Clint Eastwood. Their relationship lasted more than a decade, but was kept largely out of the public eye. Kimber, however, grew up aware of who her father was and of the complex world he inhabited. Unlike her father and many of her siblings, Kimber found her calling behind the camera. She established herself as a professional makeup artist, working in television and film, where her artistry helped actors transform into their characters. Makeup, after all, is invisible when done right, the unsung craft that shapes how stories are told on screen. Kimber's steady hand and creative eye earned her respect in Hollywood circles, far beyond the curiosity attached to her last name. But Kimber wasn't content to stop there. She moved into producing, particularly in the independent film space. As a producer, she worked on a mix of features, including thrillers and smaller passion projects, cultivating a reputation as someone who could bridge creative vision with practical execution. Those who worked with her often spoke about her ability to balance professionalism with empathy, qualities not always abundant in the film business. Being Clint Eastwood's daughter carried both advantages and pressures. The name opened doors, but it also invited scrutiny. Kimber carved her own path by excelling in spaces where her work spoke louder than her lineage. Her story reflects a determination to be measured by skill rather than inheritance. Today, Kimber continues to work in the industry, proud of the craft she has built. In her, we see the Eastwood presence not in front of the lens, but in the intricate, behind-the-scenes artistry that makes the magic of movies possible. And just 4 years after Kimber was born, Clint's first son would arrive, one who would take the Eastwood legacy into a completely different arena: music. Kyle Eastwood. In 1968, Clint Eastwood and his first wife, Maggie Johnson, welcomed their son, Kyle Eastwood. Unlike his father, who would dominate Hollywood's sound stages, Kyle's destiny was shaped by the sound of music. From a young age, Kyle was immersed in the rhythms of jazz. Clint, a lifelong devotee of the genre, often took his son to smoky clubs to watch legends like Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan perform. While other kids grew up idolizing movie stars, Kyle was studying bass lines, improvisations, and the magic of live performance. Those experiences planted the seed for a career that would take him around the world. By the 1990s, Kyle had embraced music fully, releasing his debut album From There to Here in 1998. More albums followed, showcasing his skill as a bassist and composer. Critics praised his ability to blend traditional jazz structures with modern sensibilities, making his sound accessible without sacrificing depth. He toured internationally, building a reputation in Europe and Asia, as much as in America. But Kyle's music wasn't entirely separate from Clint's world. Over the years, he contributed film scores to some of his father's most acclaimed works, including Mystic River, Million Dollar Baby, Gran Torino, and Letters from Iwo Jima. These scores, often understated and haunting, added emotional layers to the stories his father directed. In interviews, Clint spoke with pride about Kyle's talents, noting that music became a shared language between them, one that transcended the stoic silence Clint was known for at home. Unlike many celebrity children, Kyle rarely appears in tabloids. His life is rooted in the discipline of practice, touring, and recording. He built a career in which the Eastwood name may spark curiosity, but his artistry commands respect on its own. Today, Kyle remains an accomplished jazz musician with a global following, carrying the Eastwood legacy into a completely different creative arena. If Clint's legacy is etched in film, Kyle's resonates in notes and melodies, proof that creativity runs deep, even when expressed in different forms. Allison Eastwood. In 1972, Clint and Maggie Johnson welcomed their daughter, Allison Eastwood. Where her brother Kyle was drawn to music, Allison gravitated toward Hollywood, the world her father dominated. Allison first appeared on screen as a child in Bronco Billy, 1980. Acting alongside her father. But it wasn't until the 1990s that she began carving out her own career. Roles in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil and Just a Little Harmless Sex gave her visibility, while independent films allowed her to explore more nuanced performances. Though she never sought to become a box office superstar, Allison proved herself a capable and versatile actress. But Allison was not content to remain only in front of the camera. Inspired by her father's evolution from actor to director, she made her directorial debut with Rails and Ties, 2007, a drama starring Kevin Bacon and Marcia Gay Harden. Critics noted her sensitivity to character and emotion, praising her ability to draw powerful performances from her cast. For Allison, directing was not just a career move, it was an extension of storytelling. a way to connect with audiences on her own terms. Outside of Hollywood, Allison found a different calling. A lifelong animal lover, she founded the Eastwood Ranch Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to rescuing and rehoming abused or abandoned animals. The organization reflects her compassion and commitment to giving back, setting her apart from the stereotype of the celebrity child living off their parents' fame. Allison also briefly pursued modeling and launched a fashion line, proving her interests stretched beyond film alone. She has spoken openly about the challenges of being Clint Eastwood's daughter, the constant comparisons, the weight of expectations, and the pressure to live up to a towering legacy. At times, she admitted it made her want to step away from Hollywood entirely. Yet through acting, directing, advocacy, and entrepreneurship, Allison has created a multifaceted identity. Her journey shows that while the Eastwood name carries weight, it does not define her entirely. Allison's legacy blends artistry and empathy, a reminder that carrying a famous surname doesn't preclude carving out a unique voice. Scott Eastwood. By the mid-1980s, Clint Eastwood was already a household name, but his personal life continued to evolve. In 1986, he welcomed a son with Jocelyn Reeves, a flight attendant. That son was Scott Eastwood, who would eventually become the most recognizable of Clint's children. From the start, Scott bore an uncanny resemblance to his father, the same squinting eyes, the rugged jawline, and the cool, understated presence. Hollywood casting directors noticed too, but Scott refused to lean on his father's name. Instead, Clint raised him with tough love, insisting that Scott earn his own way. He worked ordinary jobs, parking cars, bartending, even construction. He learned quickly that the Eastwood surname didn't guarantee respect. It had to be earned. When Scott first began auditioning, he deliberately used his mother's last name, going by Scott Reeves. He wanted roles based on talent, not nepotism. That decision meant enduring years of rejection. Casting directors overlooked him, and opportunities were scarce. But Scott persisted, just as his father had decades earlier when Hollywood dismissed him as too tall and awkward. By the mid-2000s, Scott finally broke through. His performance in The Longest Ride, 2015, introduced him to a wider audience, and roles in Suicide Squad, 2016, Pacific Rim, Uprising, 2018, and the Fast and Furious franchise followed. Audiences couldn't ignore the similarities to his father's iconic screen presence. Watching Scott sometimes felt like revisiting Clint's early career in the 1960s. Yet Scott's story is more than Hollywood ascent. In 2014, he suffered a devastating loss when his girlfriend was killed in a car accident. He has spoken candidly about how the tragedy reshaped his perspective on life. For him, the pursuit of fame became less important than valuing relationships and living fully. Despite the weight of comparisons, Scott embraces his father's influence. He often praises Clint's discipline, his work ethic, and his refusal to let Hollywood define him. Those lessons guide Scott as he continues to navigate a notoriously unforgiving industry. Among Clint's 8 children, Scott is the one most visibly carrying the Eastwood torch into a new generation. He is not simply a mirror of his father, but an evolution. A young actor determined to prove that the Eastwood name is not just a legacy, but a promise of more stories still to come. Catherine Eastwood. 2 years after Scott's birth, Clint and Jocelyn Reeves welcomed their second child together, Catherine Eastwood, born in 1988. While her brother grew up with a hunger for the limelight, Catherine's journey was far more understated, marked by writing, selective acting, and a preference for privacy. In 2005, Catherine briefly stepped into the Hollywood spotlight as Miss Golden Globe, a role traditionally given to the child of a celebrity. For one evening, she stood on stage representing her family name, helping present awards at one of Hollywood's most glamorous nights. It was a symbolic gesture, a way of acknowledging her place in a dynasty, but it did not spark a lifelong pursuit of fame. Catherine dabbled in acting, appearing in small films such as Jersey Boys, directed by her father, and indie projects like American Virus. But her greater passion has been writing, particularly screenwriting. She has contributed to independent projects, preferring to shape stories from behind the scenes rather than appear in front of the camera. Those who know her describe Catherine as creative, thoughtful, and deeply private. Unlike Scott, who shoulders constant comparisons to their father, Catherine has managed to sidestep the expectations attached to the Eastwood name. Her life reflects a choice to embrace creativity without sacrificing anonymity. In a family defined by fame, Catherine represents another kind of legacy, one not measured in box office numbers or critical reviews, but in the quiet persistence of storytelling. She may never dominate headlines, but her work ensures her voice is part of the Eastwood narrative, even if it's written between the lines. Francesca Eastwood. In 1993, Clint Eastwood and actress Frances Fisher welcomed their daughter, Francesca Eastwood. Unlike some of her siblings who grew up at a distance from Hollywood, Francesca was born right into its glare. With two actor parents, the stage seemed set for her to pursue a career in the arts. Francesca made her first appearance as a child in Clint's 1999 thriller True Crime. Even then, she displayed a comfort in front of the camera that hinted at things to come. As she matured, she sought roles that carried more edge, appearing in films such as Final Girl, MFA, and Awake. Critics noted her willingness to dive into complex and sometimes darker characters, carving a path distinct from the cleaner, heroic image associated with her father. In 2012, Francesca became a familiar face in households across America through the reality TV series Mrs. Eastwood and Company. The show, centered on Clint's then-wife Dina Ruiz and featuring Francesca and half-sister Morgan, pulled the curtain back on the Eastwood home. Though short-lived, it gave Francesca a taste of public scrutiny, with audiences dissecting her every move. Some embraced her candid personality, while others criticized the show's intrusion into private life. Her personal life added further headlines. In 2013, at just 20 years old, she married Jordan Feldstein, brother of actor Jonah Hill, only to have the marriage annulled a week later. The whirlwind chapter reflected the turbulence of youth under the public eye. Today, Francesca's focus has shifted. She shares a son, Titan, with actor Alexander Wraith, and motherhood has reshaped her priorities, balancing auditions, acting projects, and raising a child. Francesca represents a modern Hollywood reality, trying to sustain artistry while embracing family life. Her journey demonstrates resilience, born into fame, thrust into reality TV, and marked by personal ups and downs. Francesca continues to find her balance, proving that even in a legendary family, every daughter must carve out her own identity. Morgan Eastwood. In 1996, Clint Eastwood welcomed his youngest child, Morgan Eastwood, with his second wife, television news anchor Dina Ruiz. By then, Clint was already a Hollywood legend, a far different starting point than the uncertain early years of his first children. For Morgan, this meant growing up in the full awareness of her father's fame, with no separation between family life and global recognition. As a teenager, Morgan appeared on the 2012 reality series Mrs. Eastwood and Company, alongside her mother and half-sister Francesca. The show gave audiences a behind-the-scenes glimpse of the family dynamic, and Morgan's humor and lively personality quickly stood out. Though the series lasted only one season, it made Morgan a familiar face for viewers curious about Clint's private world. She also appeared briefly in her father's films, including small roles in Million Dollar Baby and Changeling. But unlike Scott, who embraced Hollywood as a career, Morgan never pursued acting seriously. For her, those appearances were cameos rather than stepping stones. Today, Morgan has chosen a more private path. She occasionally shares snapshots of her life on social media, where she comes across as witty and relatable, but she avoids the constant spotlight. Friends describe her as grounded, independent, and quick to laugh, qualities that suggest she inherited Clint's strength of character while shaping it into something uniquely her own. As Clint's youngest child, Morgan represents the final chapter of a remarkable family saga. Where his eldest, Laurie, began in secrecy and distance, Morgan was born into comfort and recognition. The contrast between the two bookends of the Eastwood family story highlights the vast arc of Clint's personal journey, from struggling actor to silver screen legend, and finally to father of 8. From Laurie Murray, the daughter whose existence was hidden for decades, to Morgan Eastwood, the youngest who grew up knowing her father's fame as a given, Clint Eastwood's family story spans over 40 years of Hollywood history. Together, his 8 children reflect the many chapters of his own life, from the struggling young actor who barely got noticed, to the global star, and finally the reflective elder statesman of American cinema. Each child embodies a different answer to the question, what does it mean to be an Eastwood? Laurie found family late. proving it's never too late for connection. Kimber chose a career of quiet artistry behind the camera, shaping stories through makeup and producing. Kyle carried the Eastwood name into the world of jazz, letting music be his language. Allison blended acting with directing and then followed her heart into animal rescue, where her compassion became her calling card. Scott became the most visible torchbearer, carving out his own Hollywood career under the inevitable comparisons to his father. Catherine took a quieter road, writing stories that may never flash across marquees but still add to the family's creative legacy. Francesca embraced acting, reality TV, and eventually motherhood, learning how to balance a public life with personal grounding. And Morgan, the final chapter, reminds us that sometimes the bravest choice is to live privately, away from the world's constant gaze. For the rest of us, Clint Eastwood may always be the man with no name, the relentless cop, or the director whose films etch themselves into our culture. But for these 8 people, he is something far more complicated and intimate. Dad, their stories show us that even the most enduring legends are still human, imperfect, unpredictable, and deeply connected to the families they leave behind. And that may be the greatest untold story of all. So as we close the book on Clint Eastwood's remarkable family saga, the question turns to you. Which celebrity family should we explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden lives, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another untold story.